All right, hello, I am back. All right, so we had some concerns about this not being visible enough. If that is the case, do let me know because I can switch over to Photoshop. But for now, I'm going to try to show you guys on the actual paper. I can move it a little closer. So yeah, just let me know if you can see or not, and we'll get started. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Okay, so I will introduce myself. I'll tell you a little bit about the workshop. I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing today, and then we'll just jump right in. So my name is Nicole Ducker. I've taught at Max for 2 years now. I originally taught the POD course, and then I went traveling for a year, and now I'm back teaching environment visualization and the POD workshop. I've been doing art freelance in the meantime. I'm actually a graduate of Max the Mutt and definitely advocate for the quality of education that you will receive at the school. As for the workshop itself or the course, depending on if you decide to take the workshop and you just love it and you want to come to MTM, POD is your art drawing fundamentals. So what you're going to learn in this course is you're going to learn how to control your line quality. You're going to learn to train your eye to see those little details that you would normally pass over. You're going to gain the ability to more accurately measure objects, both up close to you in still life situations and also in perspective. You will do a range of exercises from line work to form studies. So you're going to be visualizing setups in 3-dimensional space and all the way to shading. So you're going to be taking your line work and then bringing it that step further into value studies. So today, what I'm going to be teaching you is what we call point to point. Now, this is, I found this is very unique to MTM specifically. If you look it up online, you can't really find any exact definition of what point to point is or what it helps you achieve. But what MTM teaches is point to point is a way of visually breaking down objects, people, anything into its rudimentary shape and then building it up from there. This helps you gain a level of accuracy that you wouldn't normally achieve. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have you guys start on a simple exercise. This exercise is just going to be, you're going to have, I would recommend everyone have a sketchbook on hand as well as a pencil. I'm going to be using a Conte pencil so that hopefully you can see what I'm drawing. We're going to start with drawing shapes in one. So we're going to start by making 4 points, connecting those lines. And then what I'm going to have you guys do is you're going to try to mimic those shapes. This is going to encourage you to really slow down and look at where you've placed these shapes. I'll go into greater detail in just a second. And then after that, we're going to do a bit of a still life study. You can choose absolutely anything in your room. You can also choose what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing my little house plant here. I'll make it a little more visible for you guys in just a bit. Maybe I'll put it on this side so you can see it better. I chose the house plant because the second study we're going to be doing is on positive and negative shapes. So that's where you're going to use what I've taught you with point to point. And then we're going to take it a step further, choose a more complicated object, and we're going to learn positive and negative shapes. I will go over that in the lesson as to what positive and negative shapes are, how to look for them, how to draw them. And then you guys are going to walk away from this workshop with a lovely little piece of your own. Sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
Yes. All right, excellent. So for the first exercise, we're going to learn point to point. I'm actually going to flip over to the next page just for a moment. Okay, so when I say point to point, I do mean very literally point to point. So you're going to be drawing a point. We're gonna make it darker for you guys to see. It's vaguely there. Another point, and then connecting those lines, those dots. Right? It is as it sounds. Now, when we see point to point, we think, well, I can do that. That's just connecting one point to another. But what we teach you at MTM is that you can take this and do it to anything. I could, for example, take this and bring it in to a square. But I can take this even further. So you can use point to point to more or less accurately get any shape you wish to achieve. Whoops. And if you continue to break it down, you will wind up with something akin to a circle. These are simply with straight lines, but you're going to wind up with a more or less, depending on if you're square, I think my square got a little elongated there, but you can wind up with more complex shapes like a circle. You can wind up with shapes like our plant leaves here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my plant over here and I'm going to show you in a little bit of greater detail, the little guy, what that might look like on a more organic shape. Forgive my setup. It's much easier when I actually have my classroom. Okay. So, can we all see the plant?
Yeah, I can see the plant. It's just the drawings are a bit blurry.
They're still blurry? Are
Yeah.
they too blurry to actually understand what's going on?
I think it's too blurry.
It's a bit
Too
blurry,
blurry?
but as long as you draw it big, I might be able to figure out what it is. Like as long as you draw it big, like not too small.
Okay. I can also see about sharing my screen. All right. Can everyone see Photoshop?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll go with that. All right. Apologies for the technical difficulty. All right. So if everyone wouldn't mind getting their sketchbooks, if you have them, I'm just going to work with a basic round brush to mimic a pencil. Or you get started. Does anyone want me to change the background to a gray so that it's easier for you to look at?
Nope, I think it's good. I think
All right.
you just need to zoom in on the Photoshop, like canvas. Yeah, like that.
Gotcha. All right. So to get started, what I'm going to have you guys do is I'm going to have you build up. Let's start with 6 and see how we feel after that. So you're going to build up 6 squares. I have the benefit of being able to copy paste, but just, you know, take your time, build up your squares. All right. Sorry, sometimes my Photoshop decides that I have clicked a button too many times, as it does. All right. So now that we've built up these squares, what I'll have you guys do is I'll have you put 4 random dots. Those might be too small. Yours will be smaller, but I just want to make sure that mine are nice and visible to you. And you're going to just place these wherever you would like. They can even be smaller or larger. No. All right. And now, just to get your hands and brains a little warmed up, I'm going to have you just draw a line between the two. Right? Feel free to go a little bit on the slower side. I just want you to follow the line nice and slow. An easier way to go about this is not to think of it as just drawing a straight line all the way across, where you just do a quick rush across, but try to focus in on the dot that you're connecting to. So you're looking at this dot, you're thinking about what angle is going to get you to that next dot, and then you're going to draw it. This is so much harder on a tablet. Another reason why I wanted to work on the traditional, but what can you do? And right. And then I'm going to do this. I also want you to think, sorry, I'm not used to working on a tablet. I have a Wacom back home, and I'm used to being able to do hand to eye. All right. So we're going to connect these. How's everyone doing on this?
Good.
One more. I promise you, it is much easier to do when you can actually see your hand moving across the page. All right. Oh my days. All right. So now that we've gotten started there, what I'm going to have you do with your next set of boxes, if you've finished that exercise, is you're now going to look at what you've done, and you're going to take that over to the other side. And so what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you think about, let's do this. I'm going to have you think about the spaces that you've created both inside and out. This is going to feed into positive and negative shapes, which is why I've started you with this exercise in particular. So normally when we create a shape, we think about the inside area of the shape, right? Simple enough. This is your positive space. But what I'm going to have you work on in this particular workshop is your negative space. This is the space that you've created outside of this shape that you've made. And so when you go to copy, when you go to copy the piece that you've done over here, I want you to think about that negative space that's happening, right? So I'm thinking about the distance that I've created here and the distance that I've created here. And I'm trying to visually bring that over, thinking about the distance down here as well. So seeing that, I would say there. My dot over here. Again, thinking about that positive and negative space, right? And my distance. And then from the top. And then what I'm going to have you do is you're going to connect these again. And as you can see, even with positive and negative space, in keeping that in mind, sometimes you're going to wind up with slight variations that will wind up making your copy less accurate. So that's what this warm-up is really going to be doing for you. It's going to be helping you see where you need improvement, and especially there, I find this with every class, every person has a preferred angle of drawing. Now, when I say preferred angle of drawing, I mean that when you are drawing a line with your pencil, there's going to be a particular angle when you're drawing against your page that is going to work for you, where you can draw a perfectly straight line, no problem. And there's going to be angles where it's much harder, right? So for me right now, an angle like this is much harder. And the reason being is that because I'm drawing with my tablet on my lap, my elbow runs into my body. This is a problem that you wind up running into more so when you are working in a cramped workspace, or especially digitally. But luckily in the course itself, you won't have that problem. It's all in person. You're working on paper. Generally, you're going to be trying to work on larger pieces of paper like what I had behind me. And so you won't really run into that because you're going to have your arm out in front of you and it's not going to be running into your body. Do I have any questions so far?
Oh, I got a question.
Yeah.
Nicole, do you have any tips on relieving like wrist pain or like back pain? Because I used to study 2D animation, and a few of my classmates and I always had issues with our hand. Like we always feel pain when we start drawing, and like we always have to be very careful about like how we draw. Like what's the best position or like best way like to draw without feeling pain? What do you recommend for that?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. So my recommendation is, and I'm going to switch back over. Okay. Can you see me again? It's probably kind of bonkers.
I can see you.
Right. I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. So we're back to the screen. All right. So the thing I would recommend the most is when you start drawing, you're going to want to take your hand, your dominant hand, whatever that might be. Somebody, it might be left. Apologies for all the lights. Just wound up with a gajillion lights around me. Here we go. All right. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take your wrist and you're going to want to just gently pull it back. Not to the point where you're feeling pain, but just enough where you feel a bit of pressure in here. You pull it back. And then you're also going to push it forward. My wrist has a fair amount of flexibility in it right now. The other thing I would recommend is that if you're working digitally, I would highly recommend investing. Oh, geez, I whacked you. Where'd it go? Good. My cuff has absolutely disappeared, but you can buy on Amazon a wrist cuff where it just goes around your thumb, wraps around your wrist. That really helps with digital work, especially if you're a bit of a mouse jockey. I know I have really bad habits where I will rest my wrist against the desk and mouse like this. That's where you get carpal tunnel from, especially as an artist. So something to avoid that is definitely a wrist brace or just getting into better posture. Now, for drawing, the way you're going to alleviate that, and I'll show you here, is most people start drawing and they draw like this, right? So you're going to be doing little lines like this. And notice what I've done here is I've pinned my wrist to the page. This is to no fault of anyone's. This is just how we think about drawing and how we are taught to write. In POD, what I'm going to have you guys do is we're going to do the reverse pencil. I don't know what the name for this is, but it's the pencil that makes everyone's hands confused for the first couple of weeks, and that's okay. Because this is detail drawing. This is for absolutely tiny little shapes that gets us our detail work. But for POD, you're going to want to use this. And the reason you want to use this is that as soon as you grab the pencil like this, it lines up your arm. And so you're less inclined to use your wrist and overwork your wrist, and more inclined to work from the elbow or even the shoulder, right? It is far easier to make a circle from the shoulder than from the wrist. So this is only really like a traditional technique that's going to help you if you're working digital, or if you're working small, not so much. But my recommendation is definitely try to use your elbow more, draw further away from you, not close up, because when you're close up, you're going to be straining that wrist. So those are a couple exercises and a couple of tips that I would recommend for avoiding carpal tunnel, because it's absolutely a very real problem that we will all face as artists at some point. Any questions about that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, I think that's the reason why I keep feeling pain all the time, is because the way my tablet and my computer and my computer chair is like set up. But the thing is, if I do it far away, I can't see what I'm doing, but I have to move a bit closer. It's like that issue, like whether to move close. I don't know how close I need to look up at my tablet.
And it's definitely a case of, trying to find that healthy balance between being able to see and not having to zoom in super far, or, your body. But, I gotta say, focus on your body over your art, because at the end of the day, you're going to be dealing with your body much longer than whatever piece of art you're going to be working on. I had the unfortunate situation of having a very talented, actually, illustrator have to drop out of my POD course because he didn't take proper care of his wrists when he was younger. And he wound up with such severe carpal tunnel that he had to drop out. And I was very sad for him, because he loved it. So absolutely, if you're finding that this is a problem, I would highly recommend take action now. Get that wrist brace. It costs almost nothing. I think you can get them at Shoppers Drug Mart as well, right? Just something to keep you from using that wrist too much, for sure. I think another exercise is thumb. You just bring your thumb around. This is because the tendon comes in here. And if that gets out of line, or if it gets stressed, that can also cause a lot of pain. As for your back, I hate to tell you guys this, but planking and leg raises, you got to exercise your backs, because, us artists especially, we are so tempted to just be desk jockeys. But if you don't exercise your back, you will wind up with chronic back pain. And once you have chronic back pain, it's very hard to exercise your way out of it, because you have to go through pain to fix it. So I would highly recommend keeping your exercise regimes up just a bit. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Photoshop, because I'm guessing most of you are now more or less done your 6. Yay, nay?
Almost.
Okay. How are we finding it?
It's interesting.
It is. It's definitely an exercise where when you start out, it feels kind of wacky. You don't necessarily feel super confident about it. Your lines look kind of bonkers. That is okay. This is not meant to be your pretty work, right? This is meant to just help you start gauging how the distance between things and the shapes that you're creating, both inside and outside of whatever the focus of your piece is. Right? I tend to work better with a texture brush. I don't know why. Maybe it's just that that instinct to draw with a pencil. MTM also has some really wonderful painting courses if you're interested in the concept art course. I'm just partial to that. Not trying to sell you guys on that necessarily. I just love painting, and they have an absolutely wonderful painting course. They bring in quite an array of painting teachers, all extraordinarily talented individuals, and you get some really fantastic insights from those courses. I mean, all of the courses, to be honest, but I can't toot their horn too hard, right? Like, don't want to scare you guys away. All right. So I'm going to clean up mine. And then I will move we'll move to the next part of this. All right. So I was really hoping to have my example object for you guys. But the only way to really do that would be yoink something off of the internet so that you can kind of follow along, which might be just what I do. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. And then I'm going to go grab a reference. Right. All right, what's something good and simple? So for this one, I want you guys to just kind of look around your house. I want you to grab an object that's not overly complicated, but that creates some shapes internally and externally. I'm pretty sure this is a plant much akin to my own. So we shall use that. This is also an exercise you can do in your free time, right? You can take an object and you can create a copy of it so that you can work on your point-to-point at any time. This is not something that you exclusively have to do through the school. I would, of course, recommend taking the course so that you get a better sense of, you know, how this works, how you can really utilize this to your full advantage. Yeah. But for now, I'm going to have to show you digitally, and you're just going to have to bear with me. So when you're starting a piece, one of the most important things you can do is to frame your image. This is deciding what composition you're going to be using, right? So something that I always tell my students is get that frame in there. That's you deciding the distinctive bounds of your picture. So what I could do is I could do the full image. I could do a portion of the image. So I could, or of your still life, right? I could decide to cut it off and just do this portion. I could perhaps cut it off there, do something like that. This holds great value for you as an artist, but also just in your day-to-day art, especially if you're going to be grounding it. So when I say grounding, I mean you're putting your object here on the ground. You're putting it on the floor. It is sitting on a plane that is not just floating in the air. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink these down for a second, or actually what I'll do is I'll do this. We're going to hide the frame for a second, and what I'll have you guys do once you've found that thing that you want to create an image of, you're going to choose some frame sizes. So maybe I'll do one that's rectangular, one that's more of a square. Maybe I'll go even wider. And what we're going to do is something called thumbnailing. Hopefully you are all somewhat familiar with thumbnailing. So for thumbnailing, I guess you guys are all working in pencil, so I should draw as if I had a pencil. right. So what you're going to do with thumbnailing is you're going to take the most rudimentary shapes of your subject, and you're going to put it onto the paper. So for what you're going to be doing, I would recommend drawing the ground plane, right? This is where it's going to be sitting on. Then I'm going to just start building out very roughly, very loosely our subject, not worrying too much about a high degree of accuracy, but more importantly, I'm worrying about proportion accuracy. I'm thinking about the big shapes that are going in here, maybe this leaf. What's going to be happening with those shapes, how they sit near each other, whether I'm going to cut things off. Right, so with this composition, I might cut off the edge of that leaf. I have decided that it's not going to be as important to the rest of the composition. And we're just going to spend some time doing this. Right, so find whatever you're going to be making a copy of. And you're just going to, or study of, my mistake. And we're just going to create these quick thumbnails. Any questions about thumbnailing?
Nope.
Anyone looking at what I'm doing and thinking that's bonkers? How am I supposed to do that? All right, I'm going to give you a hint as to what I'm doing. And I've done this in my environment course, and I found that it's been very helpful. Anyone here colorblind? I should probably just work as if with the assumption that someone is. All right, I'm going to reduce the opacity of this just because I can. And I'm going to work with black just in case anyone's colorblind, because normally my go-to is red, but this is red against green, so that might not necessarily work for everyone. All right, so what I'm doing when I transfer our subject into my thumbnail is I'm thinking about the most basic shapes going on here. And this comes back to the point-to-point we just practiced. So I'm thinking about where the angles are changing. Right? I'm creating that little point visually. Normally we start you guys off with something very simple like fruit. But because today I can't actually control what you're going to be drawing, we're starting off with whatever you have available. And so I wanted to show you guys an example of something a little more complicated so that you felt like your home items wouldn't be too overwhelming, that you can do it with anything. All right, so this is what I'm doing. You can even break it down much simpler, right? Because at the end of the day, this shape can be as simple as that, right? This is the real benefit of point-to-point. This one could even be as simple as a triangle. And there you have it. Any questions about that, about the breakdown of the shapes into points? Would you like to see the buildup from the most basic shape to a more complex shape?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right. So I'm just going to zoom in, let's say on this leaf, because this is a pretty decent example. Oops, that's red. All right. So what I would do is I would look at the top, right? So I'm thinking of it as a rectangular shape, because I'm seeing that even though it's a circle, I'm going to think about it in more rectangular shape kind of way. So I'm thinking about where that top plane is going to be, right? Right there. Now I'm thinking about the widest sections of our planes. And then I'm looking to see where the next taper is, where the next angle change is. And then where I might taper, right? So as you can see, I'm not following the exact contour of the object, right? The contour is the is external or internal changes of form, right? Form is literally just the thing that gives your shape volume as it moves around in space. So now that I have these points, what I might do, and I would recommend when you're starting your point to point, definitely start on the lighter side and then work your way to being darker. So everyone has two modes, and I've seen only two ever. You either draw, this brush does not support this very well. You either draw very light or very dark. I have seen almost no one with an in-between when they first start, and that is okay. This is just how people naturally draw. They're either very tentative and shy. This generally comes from a place of not feeling particularly confident with our work. And then there's the darker side of drawing. This also comes from a place of not feeling particularly confident with your work, but it's the confidence to try it anyways. Both have their merits. If you start light, you have the process of getting darker as you go along. This can be beneficial because obviously you're not trying to lighten your hand. And when I say lighten your hand, I mean going from dark to light. But you do have to find that confidence within you to then push it to the darker side. And for the darker people, you learn to lighten your hand. You learn to apply less pressure with your pencil. This allows you to be able to create those really lovely crisp lines once you are able to more accurately control your line pressure. All right, so now that I've got these, I'm still thinking about okay, I see what's happening there. All right, so now that I've got these, now that I've got my basic shape pinned out, what I'll do is I'll now think about these smaller plane changes in here, right? But my brush presets have been changed. I do not know why. Great. Excellent. Photoshop always does wonderful things for me. All right, so I'm going to be thinking about these shapes in here now, right? Because if I were to just draw it freehand, I would think about the shape something akin to this, which is fine, but you lose a lot of detail like that. The value of point to point is that you don't lose that detail. So now I'm still thinking about my points that I've produced here. And I'm thinking, where would I put the next set of points to change this from a straight line to a more accurate curved line? So now I'm thinking about, okay, where, if I connected a straight line, would I produce the next point? And eventually you're going to get to the point where you're able to put that point in and just connect the line. So here we have this straight line here. Where can I add the next point to achieve that curve? Right? And again, finding that point in between and connecting it. Sorry, that's my bad angle. We're getting into the realm of me contorting my wrist to try to do things. All right. And then between here and here, I would say that's our midpoint. And right. So now we're starting to see that curve happening around the leaf, right? Any questions about that? Nope. All right, excellent. I'm glad we have an advocate on the microphone. It always pays to ask questions, especially in this class. I will actually tell you guys a little story. So when I originally started at MTM, I was not the most I was definitely not the best of the class, that's for sure. I put in my all, and I eventually got to the point where I was doing, I would like to think, quite well. When I first started this exercise in particular, we were told to draw an easel, and I, for the life of me, couldn't bring myself to ask any questions and didn't understand the assignment. I later figured out what I was doing wrong. But it always pays to ask questions, especially with the teachers at MTM, because they are more than happy to clarify for you, right? It's our job to literally try to explain this in as many different ways as possible to get you guys the best experience with understanding what we're trying to teach you. So this is now what we've got. We've got the outline of our leaf far more accurately plotted out than just our basic shapes. This is the core premise of point to point, is getting the highest degree of accuracy. And as you can see, when it comes to breaking down shapes into thumbnails, it becomes very useful as a tool, right? So with years of practice under my belt, I'm able to just quickly plot out where I want the leaves to be, what I think the relationship between the distances here are. And we'll get to that in a bit. That will be a bit more into our positive and negative shapes. And able to accurately throw down those shapes without losing what it is actually about. Now, of course, there's always going to be, I'm trying to erase on a layer that I'm not working on. There's always going to be times where you make a mistake, and that is okay. One of the rules that I live by when it comes to art is nothing is precious, right? And by this, I mean, when you've drawn something, especially in the early phases, like your thumbnails, or even when you're still working on your point to point and you're getting to your refined line, you're getting to your tone, it's never too late to go back and fix things. And that's definitely something that I try to encourage in POD, is to encourage students to really just treat this as more of an exercise. Of course, you want to be able to produce something nice at the end of it, but that's really just a bonus to be added on at the end. In reality, you're really here to learn, to grow, to improve, and hopefully come away with a few nice things at the end. So here I might choose to make my pot larger. So I decided, you know what, I really love that pot. I'm going to start with that. I'm going to think, all right, so if I'm doing the pot that big, my leaves, this leaf is overhanging, right? So I'm going to look at that and I'm going to, okay, that feels about right. Maybe a bit more. This has to do with the positive and negative shapes, right? So I'm looking at this distance, and I'm looking at my distance, and I'm thinking, that feels about right. I'm also looking at the outline of the leaf that I've done here, and I'm thinking, you know what? My shape could use a little bit of a touch up. Awesome. Now I can think about how big this space is. Right? Anyone care to tell me what they're actually drawing? I can maybe help you.
I'm actually like planning to draw like a pumpkin car for one of my characters that I've made up for my comic book, but I'm like struggling to figure out what type of pumpkin car works best, because there's different types of pumpkins out there.
Yeah, you got some really fun ones. Is it just pumpkins, or are you also looking at squash for inspiration?
Yeah, I'm looking at squash too, because it was during the time of Halloween, and during Halloween, I've seen a lot of funny looking decor, and I'm like thinking, okay, there's something there that I like to see more of, like the Tim Burton like art style in those decor. And I'm like thinking, how come we still don't have those pumpkin shaped cars or those squash shaped cars? We don't even have the skull shaped cars yet, but that would be great for like a Halloween themed comic.
Yeah. So for a squash or pumpkin or squash shaped car. So for pumpkins and squash, you're generally looking at kind of a squished circle shape. That's a pitifully small squish short circle shape. Tongue twister as well. For that, what you want to do is you definitely want to find a reference where it's on a surface, right? So you'd have your ground plane, whatever that might be. Squash can also be extra fun. You can have your ovoid with a cylinder sticking out. Amanda knows what I mean when I draw this. I promise. This is a squash. The little, right? So these squash are hilarious and extra fun, and our teacher absolutely got them every year. Right? So you could create a fun little car like that, right? This is very much the shape of the Batmobile, actually, hilariously enough, right? Where you've got that that narrow shape. You just like shove those wheels in there and give it like ginormous bat wings. So you can really do quite a bit with circular shapes like pumpkins and squash and stuff like that. So for this exercise, what I would recommend doing if you're looking for some way to help yourself like that, either try to find an image of say like a Volkswagen Beetle, because they are excellent, very round shaped cars. Also some of the cars from the 90s and maybe the 80s would be a good fit. They've got those extra rounded kind of quote unquote future shaped vehicles. And now we've gone full box again. I don't know what happened. But for this exercise, I would recommend trying to find something like that. And then what you can do is you can use that to then break down your shapes and understand more of how the silhouette of the car works, especially with your positive and negative shapes, right? Cars have some great positive and negative shapes. So, for example, we all know, a wheel, right? And then you've got the well, and that comes around. But you also have the wheel well in the car, right? And that comes in front as well. There we go. Right? So we're thinking about it as a 3D object in space. But in this exercise, what you can do is you can think about it in the sense of creating that circle with your point to point, right? Or the oval with your point to point. You can also think about it in the sense of positive and negative shapes. So for this example, your positive and negative shapes will be your wheel connecting with the silhouette of the actual body of the car, and your negative shape will be this area here, creating this triangle, and your positive shape will be the actual wheel of the car and the well along with this, right? Creating this shape here. That's the fundamentals of positive and negative space for the most part, is just thinking about what these shapes are doing, both inside and outside the shapes. So as you guys are probably continuing to work on your thumbnails, what I'll do is I'll go into our oh, I can never stay on the same layer. I'll go into our plant here and I'll actually zoom right in on this guy, and I'll just show you on this example. This is the benefit of digital, I must say. Okay, so for our negative shapes, because we tend to think about positive shapes already, for our negative shapes of this leaf, we're going to think about where this leaf is intersecting with another and what shapes they create, right? So here we actually have a really nice shape being created by our plant stems. Right? So we've got this curved shape coming in off of our main big leaf. It comes across, up, round, and we've got a nice rectangular shape. This rectangular shape helps inform our sizing, right? So if we've drawn our leaf, so even in my thumbnail, we can look at my thumbnail here, I can see that thinking about this negative space that's been created, I'm looking at this and I'm realizing this is much too square if I fill it in. This has informed me that my sketch, although quick, is not accurate, right? If it were to be accurate, something I might do is take this shape and elongate it. And that is far more likely to be more accurate. And then I can then go in and use that to inform the rest of my pieces, right? We are skipping over one of my favorite lessons that involves, again, do we remember the crazy way I was holding the pencil that gives you a little more control? Where instead of holding it pinched in your fingers, you hold it kind of out in front of you with most of your fingers, it just kind of resting in your hand. When you do that, it's easier to then take your pencil and you essentially take the top bit of your pencil, you rest your thumb against the pencil, and you can use that to then measure, or up to the tip, depending on how you feel about it. You can use that to measure your object. It's one of my favorite lessons. I still use it to this day out in nature, and in the wild, you know, like in the subway or something like that. Just leave that up there for now. You can use this as a way to measure anything. But unfortunately, it's much harder to cover digitally, pretty much impossible. And obviously I can't teach you guys everything tonight. How are our thumbnails coming along? You can also send a little thumbs up or, you know, good in chat.
I was wondering if you can see this. It's kind of blurry on my end, but this is like the pumpkin brainstorm idea for the car because I kind of miss Halloween and I just wanted like a Halloween based car.
Yeah. And that's some really good stuff. Those look very fun. So I would definitely recommend that if you want to take that and do a study of that, definitely go find a little Volkswagen Beetle image to reference and do a study of that for this particular exercise. And you'll find that your accuracy on your concept will be improved because you'll have that knowledge of how the shape works, where you're overlapping shapes. But so far, you've got it really good.
Thank you.
So I got to ask, out of curiosity, are you thinking about potentially enrolling in the concept art program at the school, or even potentially something like what else has a concept art program? Seneca? Yeah.
It's
They're,
more,
they're
it's more like a prop design for like animation because I did take a few courses on character design and props. But that was like 2 years ago, and right now I'm just getting back into it. And like I just want to use my imagination and what I know, like what I see in stores, and try to
Mhm.
like translate into what I want to do. So it's basically like a pitch Bible that I'm working on for my animation portfolio.
amazing. Okay. They're back up to normal. Yeah, definitely work on little assignments like that. Studios love people who can do props. For sure, for sure. All right. And just for the benefit of showing you guys a little bit more, I'll do one more thumbnail, and then I'll get into kind of the more nitty-gritty of turning that thumbnail then into a more realized image. All right. Okay, so I'm thinking about where that's coming out. And I'm noticing this, right? So this one I've fully zoomed in because I want you guys to know that you don't always have to do the full image, right? And so this is something that you'll be doing in POD too. It's the idea that when you're framing your image, when you're getting the heart of it down, that you as the artist have control over what the viewer sees and does not see, right? You are deciding what the composition of the piece is going to be, where you're going to lead the eye, and how. I find it one of the most exciting parts, but that's maybe just me. All right. Good, thinking about that that huge stem coming in. It's another one. That's where our leap starts. So what I did there is I looked at this distance, saw my leaf, and I was like, that doesn't seem right. It's much too small relative to how big I'm drawing everything. So I bring that back up. Thinking about how far our next leaf is from that. Bring that all the way out. Where this stem is coming out of our leaf. What shape is being created there? Right. So now I've got a couple of different there we go. Got a couple of different thumbnails to choose from. This comes down to pure personal preference at this point as to what you would like to choose for your piece. Right. So once you have your pieces more realized in your thumbnails, you can then go take your favorite. And this can either be on a new page. Am I creating that line? There. This can be on a new page, or it can be on the existing page, depending on if you left yourself a little space or not. You can take your favorite. I think I might actually do, I'll probably do this one. It's the least realized, but it's got the best information in it. And I'll put my little leaf thumbnail around. The reason you want to have your thumbnail around is because this is going to help inform you when you're drawing what view you're taking, right? So if this is my thumbnail, I'm maybe at about here. Right? So because I have my thumbnail, I'm able to then visually decide, all right, this is what my image is going to be. And I can see that by my thumbnail. Of course, if you're drawing with just your sketchbook, you're not able to create a reference square around your image. And for the purposes of showing you what that looks like, changing your subject into your reference image and then taking that to the next level, I'm not going to use that box. I'm just going to eyeball it based on my sketch that I did. So when you're starting out your piece, you want to put in the most important information, breaking it down into its most rudimentary shapes. And I think what I'll do is I'll change the opacity of my eraser so you can still see when I'm erasing something and where that goes from. Sound good? All right. Just zooming in to make sure everyone can see. All right. So first things first, I'm going to think about that ground plane that I'm putting in. Because it's side by side, I can kind of see it a little better, but I'm going to be thinking about how I've zoomed in on this area and how this horizon line right here, or not that horizon line, that object, my tough angle there, will be higher up on my drawing. Maybe the low opacity thing is not the best idea, right? Because we're zooming in on the object, we're moving that up. Next, I'm thinking about where that bottom is going to be. If I was going to do this in POD and point to point, I would start with maybe thinking about it as a rectangle sitting in space. So I'm going to start with a flat plane. And I'm going to put my next point here. And I'm going to say it's traveling around in space. So I'm going to put the point there, not make it a perfect square. Then I'm going to bring it straight up. I'm going to think about how tall this plant is, especially relative to my horizon line, which is still not what it's called. It's my ground plane. Right. And then because I have broken down this shape into a more rectangular shape, if we think about that as a 3D object, then I would bring that up. Right? Now, when you're starting the breakdown of your shapes, I really want you to be thinking about the most basic shape, right? So instead of looking at this and knowing, well, this is its own little object that goes around. When you're breaking it down from the beginning, you're going to start with just the absolutely most rudimentary shapes. So we're not even going to add that lip yet. That is an entirely different level of detail that we're not at yet. Right? And then now I get to make this a more three-dimensional shape. And I'm extending my lines. You can, of course, choose to do that. You do not have to. This is just for your benefit, so you can see where the lines are going and where they're coming from. All right. Now I'm feeling like the shape is a bit constraining on me. So because it's more circular, I'm going to actually bring this into a more circular shape, just so I have that higher degree of information. Right, so we still have that old line, but now I'm saying, all right, well, it's actually a circle. So I'm going to bring it a bit closer to that. Right? This gives me the opportunity to see whether I like this shape or if I think maybe I've overdone it. Bring it back. And as I said, none of these lines are super precious to me. I'm going to readjust where necessary. Now this is feeling a lot more circular. It's feeling more accurate to what I need it to be. So I'm going to leave that as that is now. I might think about the fact that we have this in here, right? This dirt, which creates its own shape, right? So we can think of this as the positive shape of the dirt against the negative shape here. So I'm thinking about how that dirt is creating that internal shape. Now I'm going to think about my leaves. So what I would recommend doing as well, a tip, as you would, is start with the bottom and work your way up. Making point to point becomes infinitely harder if you decide to start with a disembodied shape. So if I start with this leaf, as I'm working my way up, I decide, you know, I'm going to throw this leaf in here. There's no way for me to tell how accurate that is. Well, there is, but it's much harder to tell how accurate this is when it's floating disembodied above everything else. So what I would recommend doing is that you start with your basic shape, and then your next shape up from that, which would be our stems in this case. So I'm going to think about the angle that's going on here, right? Again, that positive and negative space. Got that little space in between our rim and the distance here. So if we got the distance here, how am I going to create that shape? Right? And once we get to the point where you feel more confident with your line work, you feel like you've gotten it highly accurate, I will actually have you guys be doing this. You'll take your line art and you will actually gently shade in your negative spaces so that you can see how accurate you wound up being. Does that sound good? Exciting? A little bit?
Okay.
This is it's more fun in the class, I promise, because in the class what we do is we have you draw a tricycle and then you actually cut that out and glue it to a black Bristol board. And then you can really see the level of accuracy that you have. And it is wild. It's a lot of fun. It's great to have as a portfolio piece, something that you can show off for your work. Another tip with point to point, especially, don't be afraid, especially on your sketch, to overlap, right? So we know that the stem exists in behind the leaf, but when you're drawing, when you extend that line in behind, it allows you to anchor it more accurately to the shape on the other side so that you're not having to guess, right? So otherwise I would say maybe there, but trying to connect that is a bit more of a jump as opposed to just bringing it through. got that shape now. I'm thinking about where this leaf is coming in, where it would be disappearing from my frame, right? I'm thinking about where my frame sits relative to the edge here. So maybe it's a little closer to there. So I might extend that out a bit, right? I've increased the width because I've decided that according to where my frame is going to be, there's more width here than what I was showing here. This is based on the bottom of my pot, and I'm using the pot as the reference because I drew the pot first, and thus that is my measuring stick for everything else. The other thing I did here that you may or may not have noticed, like and you'll miss it kind of situation, is when I initially drew this leaf, I drew it up here. But, and this is something that you can do when you're using your pencil. Remember the pencil technique I was talking about, where you use your thumb to measure. So when you're measuring with your thumb, the other thing you can do is you can line it up to objects that you're studying and get the angle, right? And this is more accurate for diagonals. And then what you can do, so say we took our leaf, right? So we have our leaf, and I'm saying, all right, that's the angle of the leaf. You can then take that over and use that as a reference point. This is the most bizarre way of showing this I think I've ever done, just because it's digital. But that's something you can do, right? You look at the angle of your leaf, line up it can be anything. It can be your finger, though your fingers generally aren't straight. But if you're really desperate, it can be your finger. Your pencil is the best tool you can use for that. They are generally extremely straight, especially art-specific pencils. And then you bring it up to your image. Since I've been doing POD for so long, I can generally get a sense of whether I've gotten the angle correct or not, right? When I saw that, and I had the moment of, I don't think that I've lined up the angles accurately enough. So I reduced that angle. And I did wind up being pretty close at the end of the day. That's an extraordinarily helpful tool, and one that I would highly recommend you use as often as possible, is taking your pencil and lining it up with your objects to see if your angle is correct, right? Okay. So now I'm going to say, yeah, above, we've got this leaf going on. Think about where that stem's coming out. Where is it hitting my other leaf? So it's going to be intersected about here. Bringing that down. Okay, what do we have next? I might move over. I'll think about where this leaf is sitting relative to my corner. And because I've drawn it as a more 3D object, I can see where I think it's going to be sitting. Thinking about this shape here and it informing how that leaf is going to be coming off of this pot. Thinking about how this is overlapping. So as you can tell, at this point, I'm putting a lot more thought into where things are relative to each other in space. I've moved away from the less accurate, more kind of guesswork of my thumbnail. And I've moved full on into thinking about those angles that I'm actually seeing, getting them accurate. making sure that if I am missing the angle, that I'm going back and I am readjusting as necessary. Now, I'm looking at this and I'm realizing I think I've made these two leaves, especially relative to this one, too big. So again, because I'm on Photoshop and I want to show you what it really means to be doing this on paper, I'm going to erase it and I'm going to do it manually to show you guys that it's not precious. It doesn't have to be saved. It's just about getting it as accurate as possible. Right? So for this one, I do like that distance still. I think that's still pretty accurate, but I'm going to bring this down a bit. I'm going to reduce the width of this leaf a hair. Thinking about how it tapers off, right? So we've got that angle change there. Better. Not perfect, but it still needs some work. And I'm not worrying about that work right now because the important thing is getting it all on the page. That's another thing about this particular step, is that it's really just about getting it on the page. You don't want to over worry about, is this angle perfect? Have I gotten, this element perfectly so? The amount of times I've seen students fuss over a particular bit of their drawing, right? Like say I zoomed in on this leaf and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get everything right about it. I'm gonna get all those little details in. I'm gonna absolutely nail it. It's gonna be the perfect leaf. Yada yada yada. And then, after I put in all that effort, I look at it relative to this leaf and I'm like, it's too big. And then you have to go in and change the whole thing. So I would definitely recommend avoiding that, where you focus in on one particular element, especially early on. You're going to want to build up your piece in its entirety first, and then go in for your detail. Does anyone have any questions? Do you want to show me what you're working on so far?
I got a question. The one on the right, that leaf is a lot bigger. Was it like an exaggeration? Because sometimes I know some artists, they just exaggerate what the object is, because sometimes the object, like relative spacing, doesn't look right. So then they kind of exaggerate the size or the distance between other objects. Because I noticed that leaf on the right is a lot bigger than it actually is. So does exaggerated count? Like say if I look at a picture of a Volkswagen and I don't like the way it looks, because I wanted to make it into a vegetable shaped car, like do I just exaggerate that basic shape, like to make it look better?
So for concepts, yes, you would want to exaggerate shapes. But for this, you're going to try to avoid that. So what I'm going to do, because of the beauty of digital, I believe I was actually doing that leaf a disservice. I thought it was too small, actually. Why are you not wanting to evenly adjust? So it might have looked a bit big, but in fact, if we look at how big it is relative to the other ones, in fact, bringing it up to that size was needed, right? This is something that as you proceed through the actual workshop or course, depending on what you decide to take, this is what you're going to be starting to look for. And as you can see, even with experience, you're not always going to get it super right. But understanding those size relations is important, right? And so what I'll do here for you is I'll even fill this in so we can really see it based on those positive and negative shapes. And we'll get to see what I mean. Oh, you deselected yourself. I don't know why my tools are behaving like this. There. All right. So this is the drawing I did, right? Using point to point to get those shapes. And these are the actual shapes of the leaves, right? Traced over them, enlarged them. This is what they are. So although it might look like this leaf that I've drawn here is too big, it is in fact about the correct size.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
That leaf one at the bottom or at the top?
This one is at the bottom. This is why keeping your thumbnail is so important, right? So in my thumbnail, I don't actually have this leaf in here. This doesn't exist.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah,
Right?
I was like confused. Like I thought it was like from the photo, and I was like, huh, why does that look bigger than the one over there?
It looks bigger than that because my thumbnail is actually based off of something akin to this. Maybe a bit wider. That's why it looked so big. Yeah. So
Okay,
that this top leaf isn't even in the picture, nor is this one, and only a section of this guy, right? Yeah, so that's why having your thumbnail ready and available is so important, because it will help you see what you've chosen. Because in life, like when you're drawing from life, you don't have the luxury of putting a little boundary around your drawing. You have to kind of work off of your memory of what you've decided to draw. Did that help answer your question?
Yeah, the other question is like, what about moving objects and people? Because I had like I had a field trip to one of my local tourist areas. That was like 2 years ago, and we were supposed to like draw some people in the background as well as like birds and animals. Thing is, I couldn't concentrate because they were moving all over the place, and I didn't know what to focus on. And like I kind of just gave up because like people are kind of hard to draw because they keep moving all the time. They can't sit still, and they're like, I don't know where to start with. Should I just start with the gestures of what they're doing, or like do I just start with like what the main like what they're actually doing? It's like really hard for me to concentrate.
Yeah. So in that situation, if you have people moving around all the time, you're definitely going to wind up getting only snapshots of what they're doing. And in that situation, you might just, if you've got people, I find starting with the upside down U-shaped person is great, right? You get their feet in the picture real quick. You get their torso, maybe an arm, and the head, right? And then as you go on, you can maybe like add more details, like maybe they got a little toque, scarf, maybe some winter boots. And then you can kind of build it up from there. Or maybe like they're sitting on a bench. So what I'd say is focus on getting your objects in first, and then add in your people. right? And then you can add in any details that that you feel inclined to, like maybe they got bangs, or maybe they've got I heard mullets are coming back in. I don't know why. Wearing a t-shirt. Maybe it's a black t-shirt. I'm feeling like black today. Right. So just see what the person is doing. Maybe if they're just standing around, like what position are they standing in? Do they have a can't remember the word, contrasto going on, or they've got one leg supporting most of their weight, the other one's not really. Right? This is when the shoulders and the hips are sitting differently. And I'm gonna be thinking. That's what I would recommend doing, is just getting the basics in, and then applying the people in a way that kind of shows the mood that they came in it. Like maybe, maybe someone runs up to a painting on the wall and they just can't help themselves, and they're on their knees. They can't believe it. Maybe they're even like going as far as to, why? Right? You don't know. But just try to capture whatever they seem to be feeling, whether it's, an intense emotion or, a mundane boredom.
Yeah, okay, I'll try. I'll try to do that when I go out to my next tourist area and see if I can capture it. I don't know. It's just hard to pick out which like person does the best for me, because it's really hard to focus because they're like moving all around me. So I'm like how do I pick out like the best person? The person who stays still or the person who just moves like slowly?
And honestly, that's going to be up to your personal preference. And at the end of the day, I mean, are you intending on keeping these as more portfolio pieces, or are these going to be kind of studies?
More like a studies, because my tutor says that I have to practice more of life drawing, because when I draw characters, one angle doesn't look right, and it's always a profile view. For some reason I can't get right. It's the quarter and the front view and the back view I have no issue with. It's just a profile view. It's always an issue where the head and the neck and the body looks contorted.
From profile, you said. Profiles, you either get them or you don't, and it's totally okay if you do not. Yeah, that's definitely a go out and practice from reality. Also, if you're going to be an animator, something I would highly recommend is look at how other animators break shapes down. So I'm guessing that most of you are adults, if not all. If you are not adult, obviously I can't be going around encouraging you to watch, adult content, but something I would highly recommend, especially for new animators, is look at Arcane. The Riot show that's on Netflix. That's a really good one. They have really great facial breakdowns. Who else has really good facial breakdowns? That's simpler. I mean, as much as I'm loath to say it, Disney also does, they do the same facial breakdown every time, but they have pretty good facial breakdowns. What I would recommend doing is, do you have a digital software like Photoshop or Clip Studio? There's like a plethora of one-time purchase softwares.
Yeah.
If you have it, I would recommend taking a photo, not unlike what I've done here, turning down the opacity, and then doing a study from it. If you don't, another thing you can do is at Staples or the library. You can do it cheap at Staples, and I'm pretty sure the library's free if you have a library card. You can print out a picture, and then what you can do is you can do a trace over, right? So you can either use tracing paper, or you can just use regular paper and just, look really hard, try to ignore the background. And you can use that to help improve your understanding of how those face breakdowns look. That's going to be a huge help to you. But yeah, life drawing is definitely going to be your biggest help for sure. Did I say anything that didn't make any sense?
Are there any like good life drawing photo websites that you recommend that people study for? Especially with when people try to draw their own characters, they sometimes suffer from same face syndrome where they can't help but draw the same face over and over, but they want to make it look different. Like how, when you watch a cartoon, you know that they're in that universe, but the background characters look so different. It's because the artists are talented enough to make each character different, so they don't look like they look the same and boring all the time. And I'm like, how do I make new characters based on the age and the like occupation and like what they like to do? It's more like personality and age kind of thing that I'm always like trying to fumble, because I always have a habit of drawing the same thing.
Line of Action is a great site, so I've just pulled it up here, right? You get studies to draw from. It gives you time. This goes for everyone too. Oops, got rid of it. Where'd you go? There. Right? It's called Line of Action. There are a couple other sites. This is one that I use. You get to choose, if you're not as familiar with traditional art, especially, you can choose covered models. You can choose the age and your timing. So I would recommend that if you're looking to kind of avoid that. The other thing is I'm 100% for reference images. Reference images are going to be your best friend in that regard. So for example, I use Pinterest a lot. I use them for studies because at the end of the day, some of those images may be licensed. So you do have to be careful about what you use and how. Because you never know if they just belong to someone and they've been kind of co-opted by the website. Yeah, so there you can find some really great photos of faces. You can get some really wild ones, and I would recommend going for like, there's old folks, there's people making crazy like gestural faces. Those are going to help you in the long run to start to understand how things are happening. So what I'm going to do here is I'm working with a digital brush, just in case anyone's wondering. I am going to lighten up my lines here because I didn't have the luxury of working it with a proper pen pressure. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my slightly more accurate rendition of my leaves and my vines, and I'm going to go in and I'm actually going to start doing the more precise point to point, right? This is where I'm going to add my additional points to go from, boxy rim to circular rim, and my boxy leaf to my more well-rounded and accurate to our subject leaf. Right? All right. So keep working on yours. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will just be putzing away at this, and then start at 6. Okay. We are actually at the point now where you can go take a break. I'll stick around and answer any questions that anyone might have because I'm doing fine. But if you want to take a quick 15-minute break because we have been going for an hour and a half now. Feel free. I'm going to stick around and answer questions. And I'll keep on working on it.
Okay, I'm gonna go take my break too. Okay.
Okay.
That's good.
All right, so we should have people starting to trickle back. Does anyone else have any questions? Remember, you can ask in chat. You don't have to turn on your mic for it.
Yes, I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned there's the concept art. What is exactly concept art in the school?
Okay, so the school teaches 3 courses. One is animation, one is sequential art, and one is concept art. The main difference between them is where you intend to wind up once you have graduated. So the courses are specifically designed to get you hired at the end of your studies. So for concept art specifically, that is a course that will direct you down the path of being able to work for example, video games. Whenever a video game starts up a project, they have concept artists make them designs for characters, environments, props, stuff like that. You also have that for film. So you can have costume design for films, set design. You can have mood boards. You can also work in the video game industry. I already covered video games, and you can work for animation. You do get, I believe you still get cartooning, if you so choose to go down that path. You also get some courses in VFX. So you're taught mostly realism and concept art, which is how it differs from animation. So for VFX, that's things like adding in a different sky, or adding skid marks from a tire in a chase scene, because in reality the car isn't actually moving, or something akin to that. So that's what concept art is going to get you to. It's going to get you to the point where you're going to be able to create realistic character designs, prop designs, and environment designs. Does that answer your question, or would you like some additional clarification?
Yeah, thank you so much. I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, if you would like to work more independently, like if you would like to, say, start up a YouTube channel, I would recommend animation's probably your go-to. They tend to do pretty well popularity wise. If you also want to work for yourself, but you want to be more of an illustrator, sequential is definitely your cup of tea. Those are people, like, you're generally going to be working to make comics if you're studying sequential arts. So that's comics. I believe they are also pretty good for storyboarding. So for, again, movies or TV shows or animations, storyboarders, that is actually during the beginning of COVID, it was a very popular job posting. Right now, game artist is something that is definitely being advertised for a lot. So that would be our animation program that you'd be looking for if you were looking to do that. So that's like, you learn how to 3D model in both concept art and animation, but in animation, you learn how to rig, you learn how to actually move them around, you learn how to do all those like little details, like adding, additional effects to actual video. So it really depends on what you want to do with the knowledge you got from the art. And I mean, if you're looking to just build up even a traditional portfolio, right? You want to perhaps become a traditional painter, or what else could you do? Or an illustrator, right? For example, you know, at the exhibition or whatnot, you have those portrait drawers. That could be something that you just take first year in, right? There's nothing really keeping you there unless you're like at MTM, unless you look to have a job in animation, film, or video games, or being an independent graphic artist.
Great, thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, I believe that MTM can really offer you anything you would possibly want. It's just about really what you want, what you want to walk away with as your skill set, because each course after year one gets highly specialized. And so, you know, if you wanted to do more painting, but you're in animation, you're not going to get it. Or vice versa. If you want more 3D and you're in sequential, you're not going to get it. So it's really about kind of knowing where you want to go with what you got. How's everyone's pieces coming along? Are we at the point where we're now refining our point-to-points? We're getting in those additional shapes? Are we still working on getting our larger shapes in more accurately? How are we feeling? How are we doing?
My hand cramped, so I had to take my hand a break.
Yep. If your hand's cramping, definitely take a break. Sitting down for 3 hours and drawing, if you're not used to it, can be physically demanding. Absolutely take breaks and take care of your hands and your wrists. Another thing I would recommend, if your hand's really cramping up, try to consciously think about how much pressure you are applying, not to the paper, right? Because you can draw, you know, light as can be, as opposed to, you know, super dark. But you can also be applying a lot of pressure to your pencil, right? So when you're holding it, it's not going to work. I need a bigger space. When you're holding your pencil, right? I think most of us are going to have our finger something akin like to that, and then our thumb on the bottom. Yes. Trying to draw hands. Yeah. That's hand. Now, sometimes you can hold it very lightly, right? I tend to hold mine on the lighter side, where I rest the pencil on my middle finger. And so it kind of sits in behind there. This I find helps alleviate some of the pinch that happens if you're using your thumb exclusively. Because if you're using your thumb, gosh, this is rough. Anyways, if you're using just your thumb and your pointer, you can wind up applying a lot of pressure inwards, right? And that puts a lot of pressure on the tendons in your thumb. And you gotta remember, like, those are some pretty big tendons. They do a lot of work. Your thumb's very important to your hand, being that they've contributed to our species' success. So if you find that you death grip your pencil, try to just remind yourself every once in a while to ease up on that grip, to kind of hold the pencil more delicately, as it were. This will both help your art, because you won't be applying unnecessary rigidity to your ability to move your wrist and to work with your tool, whatever that may be, pencil, stylus, marker, whatever floats your boat, paintbrush, though paintbrushes are an entirely different story. Yeah, I'd recommend at least trying to be conscientious of squeezing too hard against whatever your drawing tool of choice is.
Do you recommend try drawing with your other hand? Like say your right hand is the dominant hand in drawing, like do you think it's better just for me to like try practicing with my left hand, because my left hand never drew anything before, so like would it be better if I just start using my left hand from now on?
So for that, what I would recommend is opposed to doing full drawings, something that you can do, and this is something that our animation teacher taught us. Well, taught, it's a relative term. It's an exercise that she showed us, is you switch hands and you draw circles, right? So my right hand can do pretty good circles. They're not bad. They're not great. And then you do your left. So this is my dominant. I guess this is a better way of putting it. Dominant, non-dominant. And then you try to do circles with that one as well. This is really it's not gonna help your hand as more as it's gonna help your brain. Right? This is so much harder with a tablet, I promise. Yeah, I haven't done these exercises in a very long time. But you can see that it absolutely forces your brain to start behaving in different ways. So it's definitely an exercise you can do. I wouldn't say it's necessarily something that I would recommend in regards to consistently doing work. Oops.
Were there anyone successful at like mastering both hands at drawing? Like say like one of their arms got damaged like during an accident, so they are forced to use their other hand that's still okay, but it's not as dominant as the one that they're good at.
Did we have anyone? I did. There was someone who, I don't think they were in my year, but in I think one of the years ahead of us, I think someone did injure their wrist, and they did get rather proficient at drawing with the other hand. It's definitely something you can train. It just depends on how long you want to take on whatever you're working on.
Okay.
I would not necessarily recommend it as something to pursue unless you really want to, actually train your other hand to do that. Otherwise, I just recommend doing exercises with your non-dominant hand.
Okay. So just practice drawing circles with my non-dominant hand.
Mm-hmm.
How long do I practice? Like 30 minutes?
You can practice as long as you would like. Generally what we did was I believe it was 15-minute intervals. Another thing you can do is you can do lines. So something I do as a warm-up exercise in my POD classes is I'll have students do just try to draw lines as straight as possible with equal distancing between them. Right, this helps you just gain better control over your lines. And then also at angles. Angles are a good one. This helps you practice those angles that are more difficult for you. Right, so for this is the tough angle on my tablet. As you can tell, it gets wiggly. But yeah, I would say if you want to do like a little half an hour practice, absolutely do like half a page of the circles. and then half a page of just lines, because you can also do the same thing with your non-dominant hand, right? So I can feel it. I can feel the wiggles now, right? So these are pretty helpful exercises. I'm better at the straight lines, clearly, than the circles, but only to an extent. Yeah, so this is definitely something that you can do as an exercise, the circles and the lines, and then you do the diagonals as well. You can also do, right, so I'm generally going top to bottom. You can also try doing it the other way, though it really depends on what medium you're using. If you're doing digital, I would recommend trying going the opposite direction. If you're doing traditional, generally going up will put you against the grain just by how your hand motion goes. It will also cramp up your wrist, so you'll wind up with a crazy cramped wrist like that, thusly. Not the most fun thing. Wouldn't recommend doing it too often. It's worth a little practice, but not much.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Whew. I'm flying there. Oh, and another exercise you can do, sorry, really tangenting off here on the exercises, but if you want to work on your line quality, which is a combination of precision of, so your line quality consists of accuracy, how straight you can get it, or accurately curved, right? The getting your perfect circle and trying to close it in the middle. Then there's your edge control. So your edge control, it's a bit more obvious here. It's trying to go from kind of, oh, it's so hard. I don't know if I have any brushes that have that degree of taper on them. Maybe this guy. Yeah. So your edge control is going to be getting that consistent width, right? As opposed to something kind of like that. And then there's the reduction of feathering, right? So, you know, working towards getting that nice line, whatever you want it to be, as opposed to, you know, it's hard for me to do feathering these days. But, you know, doing all these little lines to try to get something that you would really want to achieve with just 1 or 2 strokes. So an exercise you can do for especially your edge control will be actually intentionally increasing and decreasing the width of your line as an exercise, and then doing the inverse. Right? And through this, you're understanding exactly how much pressure is required to get the result that you're looking for. And it's not easy. And this is a good exercise to do in digital as well, because if you're working with a brush, especially one that has the pen pressure on it, it's a great exercise to get a better control over what your hand is doing while you are doing line art, or even painting, digital painting as well.
Okay, I didn't know that. I might try that tomorrow morning with my left hand from now on. My right hand's so exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're finding that you're experiencing some like real problems with your wrists, definitely, you know, take a break, recuperate. Sometimes when we're in school, that's not always an option. If you cannot recuperate as an option, strength training is definitely something that I would recommend, right? So folks, you know, don't just go out and run marathons, right? We'd all agree that that sounds absolutely bonkers. No one in the right mind would do that. But artists absolutely will go from, you know, having to take a break from art because of, you know, life, school, you know, your job, your whatever your day job is. And they'll go from taking an extended break to fully drawing again. So I would absolutely recommend avoiding going from one extreme to the other, from not working on it at all to then using your wrists excessively. And the way you avoid the injury in that situation is by strength training. Like, I hate them as much as the next person, but push-ups are unfortunately a great way to help strengthen your wrists, because you've got your weight on your wrist and you're flexing it. It exercises all the muscles in there. Something that I find generally isn't talked about very much is, you know, we think of our wrists as a single unit of our body, but in reality, it's just a part of a much bigger system, and that system is our arm, right? So strengthening your wrist area is important, but the reality is that your wrist area is mostly comprised of tendons. You will learn about this if you go to MTM and wind up getting to year 2, where you have introduction to anatomy. You learn the anatomy of the face, the hands, and the wrists, including the, like, you learn all of the anatomy, but you get exclusive, like, features on heads and features, hands and feet. You learn about, you know, what tendons are important, what muscle groups are important. So you absolutely want to keep that flexibility in your wrist going, because those are all tendons that will, if rubbed together the wrong way, will inflame, and that's where your carpal tunnel will come from. Or if your muscles are too weak to support the tension that the tendons are putting on them, then that can cause problems too, because the tendons will snap against the muscles and cause problems. So keeping your arms, you don't have to be strong, just, you know, a little bit stronger than maybe you've kept them in the past will go a long way. I know I've definitely, as someone who does a lot of digital art, who does a lot of sitting down art, I have had to add, you know, a workout routine in the morning exclusively to support my sedentary art lifestyle.
Is it healthier to sit down and draw or stand up and draw? Because I'm like thinking of changing how my workstation is set up, because I've noticed that the more I sit down and draw, I feel tired and sore on my shoulders and my arms. But like if I'm standing and doing a little quick drawing, I don't feel that sore. So I don't know if it's like the way the setup is doing, or is it just my mind like saying, okay, this is really tiring?
No, you are absolutely getting tired. So we don't think about it much, but any time that you're not lying down, gravity is acting upon your body, especially, you know, your back. So you've got your shoulder blades sitting in your back. You've got your spine sitting there. So what we don't think about very often is that gravity is always acting on us, right? Gravity is always pushing down on us. And something you will learn in year 2 anatomy is that you have a really important muscle grouping in here called the strong cords. So when you're experiencing that back pain, it is more likely than not because something, right, whether it's the muscle groups that come up in here, it could be these guys down here. You've got a couple different ones. I'm doing very, very broad strokes here. You also have your, how do they function? Your trapezius as well. That's at the top. You've got a couple of muscle groups here that if one gets weak, it pulls, right? So if you've got your strong cord here and you've got your trap up at the top, because it sits over top of your strong cords to a point. If for whatever reason your strong cords are having to hold up your body because your posture has kind of gotten into a bit of a not great posture, it is having to hold up both your head and your back, right? So gravity is pushing down on your spine, on your whole body. And these muscles, when they're under stress like this, they can actually pull away from each other. And that's where a good portion of your pain is coming from, is that some of the muscles aren't being allowed to relax, and so they are cramping up. Some of them are stronger than others, and they're pulling against each other in very uncomfortable ways. I think I've done myself dirty here. Yeah. I would absolutely, Google's going to be your best friend in this one. Wherever, look up the anatomy of the back, like muscle groups of the back, and then look up exercises that deal with the muscle group that is related to the area that you are feeling pain. And generally, I find that alleviates the pain the fastest. It's not a guarantee. You know, I know a lot of artists with scoliosis. And you know, that just doesn't work for them. But yeah, I think in that situation, exercise is going to be your best friend, or standing, because when you're standing, you're using different muscle groups. Generally, you've got a lot more uniform muscle usage going on. One thing that I think most people notice when they start POD in person is that because they are standing at an easel and they've got their arm out in front of them, their shoulder gets sore, like right in here, because they're having to hold up their arm the whole time. This is perfectly normal. But yeah, when you can stand, I would recommend it. But you know, I am no physiotherapist, I'm no scientist, but most of what I see and hear is it's generally better for you. If you really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty, and as a concept artist myself, I love learning about why things are, you know, why our anatomy is built the way it is. You know, humans, when we were, you know, starting to stand up and whatnot, or depending on your beliefs, you know, when we were first kind of showing up, we were very nomadic. We were running around, we were walking around all the time. It's actually one of the reasons why we are so successful, is that we can just outwalk any other animal on the planet. So standing up is going to be 9 out of 10 times better for you. Now, of course, you know, for folks who are, you know, impaired in that regard, it's going to be different for them. It's going to be a different story. Everyone's body is unique, and I can't speak to all of it, but definitely for whatever your state of ableness is, I would recommend the most exercise you can handle and standing when you can. It's a bit of a long-winded response, but does that help? Okie dokie. I am getting close to being about ready to move on to the last step. I don't expect that many are there yet, because this is your first time around, and I would hope that I, with more experience, would be able to take this faster than you guys. And this is the beauty of, you know, going to MTM as well, is that because the curriculum is so full, because you're doing art every day and you're utilizing these skills all the time, your speed and ability to complete these, you know, like the breakdown of shapes, you're able to do it much faster. It does get better. It does get faster, I promise. And it's really satisfying actually when you do. There's nothing quite like finishing up your course and looking at where you started and where you are at the end. It's a really magical feeling. And I hope to accomplish that with the workshop. I hope to have you guys, you know, you learn the basics and it won't feel like much at the beginning, but by the end you will see such a marked improvement in your work. And I hope you're able to feel that level of satisfaction that I know you can get with the amount of practice that we give you. All right, so we got a little convoluted in here. I'm able to keep track of this. I don't expect everyone would be able to keep track of our plant spaghetti in there. But I am more or less done. Now, are there areas to improve? Of course. Being that or to be honest with mistakes that happen, and also because I'm not going to be able to see most of your work, I want to kind of show where things can always be improved. So, looking at my piece, I can say with confidence that I have congested this area of my piece. Right? Obviously, with digital work, you can fix this pretty easily. You can move things around. You can readjust as needed. But for the purposes of this, I am not going to. Actually, I have entirely skipped a bit. Yep. And then there's this guy. Yeah, so as I said, it's a bit congested, but you know, you're going to be experiencing this too, and that is a-okay. The important thing is that when you see things like this happen, you catalog that mentally, and then you address it later, like when you're on your next piece. Because sometimes it's not about getting your piece perfect, it's about learning what you can from your piece and then applying it to the next one. Artists, I find, tend to do really poorly with stagnation. We tend to like to move and learn and grow and keep striving for improvement in the next project. I could just be spouting nonsense, but that's my experience with it. You noticing that actually carries up in there. Welcome, totally. So with this last little bit, we're going to get on to the really exciting stuff. So if you have wound up getting to the point where you're feeling pretty happy about our point to point, we're looking at it, we're cleaning up those lines that we've got left over. We're saying, yeah, this is it. This is the good stuff. Or I'm done with this. This is enough. I I have learned what I can, and I'm calling it quits because, gosh, I can't stand this anymore, which is totally fine. Making sure that we get in our last little bit so we're not missing anything. All right. Now comes the fun part. I'm going to do this on a different layer just so I can adjust anything as needed. You guys will be doing this on, obviously, the single layer because, right. What I would recommend doing is taking the flat side of your pencil. So as opposed to you've likely been drawing like this the whole time, or you're creating a line like that. There we go. Now you're going to turn your pencil on its side. You're going to bring it down. And you're going to use the flat edge probably to about here. And you're going to create some tone. Should I cheat? I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to cheat for you guys. All right. So what you're going to do is you're going to fill it in as best you can, and you're going to fill in those negative spaces. Maybe I will cheat. This is going to take forever. Right? The reason I'm having you do this is partially because it's very striking and you're going to wind up with a lovely piece at the end of this, regardless of whether it's 100% accurate or not. It's going to feel pretty darn good to see this at the end of the day. The second reason I'm going to have you do this is that it's going to give you a better sense of where you've created those positive and negative shapes accurately. Right? So up to this point, I've been having you think about it, but now you're going to actually get to see if you have accurately captured those positive and negative spaces. Right? You're going to try to do it a little more uniform than I am. I am struggling with my software. I could just cheat. I might just cheat. We're going to do that. I'm just going to use we're going to use full pressure here. Right. This is going to let you see what those positive, negative shapes, if you got them accurate, if you were missing some stuff. And this will also help show you where you are missing accuracy. So you might have some really good accuracy with your positive shapes, like your leaves, which I may or may not have to an extent. As I said, I've narrowed the gap here, unfortunately. But absolutely use this as a learning experience. You can also do this just in your sketchbook in general. It can both be very visually appealing and a great learning tool. And for the person who is talking about drawing faces, this is absolutely something you can translate to your life drawing. So if you're really struggling with getting that, at least the silhouette of the face, to feel realistic, to feel, proportional, this is something you can do with your portraiture as well. Even your life drawing, you can do this. Nothing says those arms are too long, like filling in the negative space and realizing their hands are down at their knees. Yes, I have done that. Yes, it was year one. We learn. Right? I feel like MTM is a great environment that absolutely fosters you at whatever level of skill you have. Be it you're experienced and you're already creating, professional looking portfolios, you can still come to MTM and grow and develop your skills into something truly remarkable that you could just step out of the school and get hired. Or, you know, you're starting because you've found that you have a passion for it and you want to see where you can go with it. MTM's a great place to go because they're not like some of the other schools that have a certain degree of artificially inflated graduate quality by reducing the amount of people coming in who need that extra help, who are not considered as good at the beginning. MTM doesn't care how good you are at the beginning. They care about giving you the skills to be as good as you could possibly be at the end. And as good as you can possibly be is hireable. Because anyone could do art. Absolutely anyone. I believe that with everything I got. Okay. So if anyone has actually gotten to this stage and you started to shade it in, you'll start to see some of those shapes come to life. Pretty exciting stuff. I'm personally just leaving my ground plane alone. That's because there's not much going on here aside from this, but I'm just going to leave that be. But for the benefit of you guys, I'm going to just quickly go over my reference photo and see how accurately my shapes are. So I'm going to look at this and look at my reference, and I can see that although I did pretty okay, I would say I could have been maybe about yay bigger. Right? So if you're finding that that's your problem, then you might struggle with condensing vertically or in. That's okay. That is definitely something that comes with time. There's no need to worry about that. Got that little shape there. That's pretty good. Not too fussed about that. Unfortunately, it does point out the glaring flaw that I've put into my piece, and it's that the distance between these elements is definitely off. So if I were to take Photoshop and just, where's the right there? If I was to take this into Photoshop, I might, it's in Photoshop, but if I were working digitally, what I would do is, because I believe that the shapes are relatively close to what they need to be, I might do something akin to this, right? This depends on if you're working digitally or not. Obviously, traditionally, this isn't going to be an option. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to check those shapes again with a little shape there. And now, yeah, much happier. Right? So there's really no need to worry if you haven't achieved that. Another reason not to worry, and I want to stress this, is that at the end of the day, so long as you are avoiding what we call tangents, which is when you have shapes awkwardly interacting with each other. So say the edge of this leaf actually came out and touched the edge of this stem right here. So long as you're not having situations where they encounter each other directly on the line, that's what we call a tangent. So long as they're not interacting directly on that tangent, at the end of the day, it's about what the final product looks like. Right? Now, for POD, you're trying to get as accurate as possible, but part of it is also, do you believe it? Is there anything happening here that is kind of an unforgivable, atrocious tangent where I did have one unfortunate student. We had setups where we had some, and if you do the workshop, you will be doing this, where we had, what do we have? We had a setup with some fruit. So we had like an apple, an orange, and kind of I think we had a papaya or something like that. Right? So I did have a student who was looking dead on at the setup, and they had the craziest tangents you could possibly imagine. They had, everything was lining up directly on top of each other. I don't know how they found this particular viewpoint, but yeah, sometimes life just does you dirty like that, where you just have, tangent after tangent after tangent. In a situation like this, where you have been dealt a particularly bad hand when it comes to the composition of your piece, my suggestion is always and forever to just get up and move a little bit over, where you're no longer looking at things with such a wild perspective, where your drapery is not hitting directly on your objects anymore. Right? We're not getting those weird tangents on the corners anymore.
Got a question on those type of perspective. Would you only get away with it if you're trying to do like a fish eye lens perspective? Because I know it's kind of like a weird thing, but I've seen some environmental artists experiment with weird angles, like looking up or looking down, or like their bird's eye view. Is that the only time you can get away with that?
To an extent. So what I've done here is the equivalent of having the student look at the fruit from a head-on standing position. So this would be them with an easel in reality, and they're just looking at this at a very unfortunate angle, where it just so happens to look like everything's lining up with each other, versus them moving ever so slightly down. MTM has what we call them donkeys. Sometimes they're called horses, mules, what have you. They're sitting desk space, sort of. Is that the right word for it? To an extent. Where you sit down in front of the easel. So that's what's happened here, is instead of looking from above, they're now looking at a more head-on angle.
So is it eye level then? Like if he's sitting down, it's like in front of the object, but it's eye level, but it looks too clean or looks too straight or something.
Yeah, it was just a situation where I had a bunch of drapery that did look good from every angle except for the one they chose. It was very unfortunate. But that is something to keep in mind when you're doing your pieces, is, here right? This is a natural tangent. As an artist, you would make the decision to either move your leaf out or move your leaf in so that it's not sitting against that stem. And that's something that I do cover tangents, of course, but it's more of something that once it's covered is just about enforcement and reminders to not to either make the artistic decision to move your object away from the tangent or to adjust your perspective so you avoid it. But yeah, that was just a hell of a situation. It was very like it was unfortunate because it was a very busy that was a very busy class. We had how many students did I have in that class? I think I had something like 14 students in a very small classroom. MTM recently, well, not recently, moved within the last couple of years. And the space that we now work in is much larger than we used to have. So you're not going to wind up with situations like that where you're going to be stuck in a not so great composition. There's going to be lots of room. Everyone can fit. And there's more than enough of me to go around. All right, we're kind of winding down now. We're down to the last 20 minutes. How far have people come? Does anyone want to show off their work? Maybe we'll go back and see if anyone wants to show their work. Feel free. I'm here. Can get my advice. Or we're just happily plodding away on our drawings.
I'm taking a break away from my drawings today because I feel like the more I look at them, the more I feel like there's something wrong with them.
Mm.
Like I'm staring too much, like doing an essay. And with essays, when you look at it too much, you think there's something wrong and you just run into artist block or writer's block.
Yeah, and that does happen, for sure. And this is part of the reason why we take breaks and why I'm personally not terribly picky about, you have to take your 15-minute break, at the halfway mark, or it just has to be 15 minutes. If you're really feeling like you cannot see the art, and you're feeling stuck, you're stuck, absolutely stepping away from your art, or even backing away from your art, you stand up and actually physically back away from it. That can also be a great way to gain a new perspective on it. But these are the pumpkin buggies, right?
Yeah, the pumpkin buggies, because I'm looking at Volkswagen and like, I don't know, I just don't like the shape of the Volkswagen. It's just bugging me because it's like boxy. And when I look at natural pumpkins, they're more round-ish, and I kind of want to make it look organic, but at the same time functional. You know what I mean? Like when you look at cartoons, like not everything like in the world that they use is based on real life. They put some imagination on it. Like Cinderella's a pumpkin carriage. That's the closest thing I can think of as my pumpkin buggy.
I was gonna absolutely recommend that actually. Yeah, the most recent is it the most recent adaptation? It's not the most recent adaptation of the Cinderella story, but the most recent Disney adaptation of the story definitely had a pretty fantastic pumpkin carriage. They kept that round shape to it. Doing studies of that would work. The question is, are you planning on sticking with this car motif that you're going for, or are you going to lean more heavily into the kind of carriage situation? Like, are you going to have an engine? Are you going to have, you know, a drivetrain in the vehicle, or is it going to be a more rudimentary vehicle?
It's gonna be more like those old-fashioned looking cars, like where instead of tires, you see those wheels that have it looks
Yeah.
like the steering wheel of the ships kind of thing.
Yeah, they still
Um,
have the spokes.
Yeah, the
sticking
old
out.
folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, I kind of wanted to make it look goofy because you know how jack-o'-lanterns, they have the interior lighting inside, and you can see the light through the eyes, right? I was thinking, the car lights, the front and back are eyes of the jack-o'-lantern for the pumpkin buggy. Like they have the main window where the driver can see, but then they have extra eyes that see as like flashlights for the car. And it's basically a gang of scarecrows like driving a jack-o'-lantern.
Right. Yeah. So then in that case, I would say, oh, I need to share the screen again. Share. All right. So in that case, what I would recommend is going all the way back to what we've been learning here, our shape design, and our positive and negative space. So our pumpkins are generally akin to this. Sometimes they have a flatter bottom just because, they're sitting and on the ground as they're growing up. So if you got a pumpkin shape like this, think about what shapes you can add to it to give it that car look. Do you want to add that kind of rounded? And the reason I'm putting a square at the bottom here is for perspective. You will learn this in both perspective and props and objects. So do you want the engine to be here? And it's kind of this goofy, like sticking out, and then you've got kind of a carved window, or even have this be further in. Right. What else could we do with the shapes here? Could do that squash shape. We have the windshield wrapping around that. Right, this is reminiscent of the old cars, the ones with the little hood ornaments. You can have like a bird, scary looking bird there. There we go. Also thinking about what shapes cars have on them, right? Generally, the older cars have those really big grills because their engines were bonkers. Now, something you'll learn if you take animation is sticking shapes out, right? So you might stick the grill out of the car, and you might stick the lights out of the car, right? Make it extra goofy. We'll also stick out of the car. You probably you'd have little wheels up front, bigger wheels in the back. What other kind of squash do we have? We've got pumpkins that sometimes form like this. Right? How can you turn that into a car? Blend on. So it's really just playing about with those shapes. But what do you have in mind? What kind of vehicle are you basing yours off of?
I'm basing it off of a smart car because that's the closest thing when I think of pumpkins. Because you know the smart cars, they're kind of small and they look kind of more roundish.
Yeah.
And they don't look super long because when I think of super long cars, it doesn't feel like it's a pumpkin. It feels like another type of vegetable that I don't like to think about. Like I don't like to think about it's a cucumber or eggplant or what are those annoying vegetables I see in the market? But like corn, no, I was mostly thinking like pumpkins like in autumn, like people using them for decor and stuff.
Mm. Okay. Right. So this is my point. This is definitely something that we cover in POD is the shape language of things. So I'm going to do a quick little perspective platform for myself because cars are not my strong suit. All right, so I'm thinking about what the curves of this car are. What angles am I seeing? Wow, they've got some pretty crazy windscreens on them now. They've got that
Honestly,
hatchback.
yeah, I know some cars are getting more rounder. Like they got
Mhm.
rid of the harsh edges, and they're making
So,
more curved and friendly, like soft. Like what was it like Tesla, like Elon Musk's
yeah.
cars? They look more
Well,
futuristic.
Elon has comically gone in two very different directions, right? So you have his electric cars, which are quite round. And then you have the Cybertruck,
Is it a
which is
truck? I thought it was a
probably
bus or something, like a taxi.
the Cybertruck.
Yeah, I thought that
Nope,
was like a
that was meant to be
taxi.
a regular consumer car.
Oh,
Yeah. My partner actually uh said that they saw one in the wild the other day. I couldn't believe it. Someone actually driving around in a Cybertruck. Um, so they're out there. They exist. They are commercial cars for the somewhat average everyday person. Okay, so the primary thing about the smart car is that they're mostly window. So that's definitely something to think about. Is how much window do you want on your pumpkin? And so you can kind of see me actually to tie this into the lesson, you can see me utilizing point to point to an extent. Right? I'm bringing these lines through. I'm keeping the shapes simple. And I will be teaching you guys if you decide to come to the workshop. I will also be teaching you about shape breakdowns, right? And all right, that's looking a bit more like a car. So when you're designing, you want to think about what elements you're going to take and what elements you're going to leave behind. So if this is your car, what elements are you going to yoink from the design? What elements are you going to leave behind as not a part of what you want out of your design? This boy feels like you should be longer. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so minis are great, but they don't necessarily 100% screen pumpkin. So something I might do, and iterations are your best friend, is just leave that on. So I want this card to feel more like a pumpkin. So I probably round that top out. Maybe bring that nose in. Are you gonna actually keep like a jack-o'-lantern grin on it?
Yeah, I was actually thinking having a big smile. That was my initial draft, like like that, because it just shows expression of a jack-o'-lantern. Um, and I want that thing to glow. So that was the thing. The eyes are like slanted just like a real jack-o'-lantern. So it's kind of close to what I was imagining.
Right. So now we're thinking about exaggerating shapes. What else screams jack-o'-lantern? So something that that pumpkins do, and I'm not 100% sure if we'll be able to do the squash study because generally that happens in the fall, whereas we're doing this in the winter/spring, is that pumpkins have those lines across them, right?
Yeah, that's where I was drawing that on my thumbnails.
Yeah. So what we normally cover is overlapping shapes, especially in point to point. And we get this with the form study too. So a part of the workshop will absolutely be taking contour lines around our object and using that to inform how things are overlapping. So pumpkins do this lovely business, which is why we love to use them, is because they have this wonderful overlap of these repeating cylindrical tubes that they're built out of. And then you might have some additional at the top, and the stem sticks out. So something you could do for your little pumpkin car is you could really play around with this, I was going to say tubular, but that's ridiculous, isn't it? These tube shapes, right? So you could kind of,
If that stick out, that would look more like a straw of a pumpkin spice latte that I've seen from the Starbucks promo.
that's true. So something to keep in mind is that these do not have to stay in the final draft, right? So when we do this exercise, I have you guys draw in these contour lines just so that you can get that idea in your head. In reality, you would have it like this and maybe have a basic shading layer that would simply inform that this is a tube-like structure. Right? Wouldn't necessarily transfer so well in flat colors, but would definitely come across in at least your shading pass. The other thing is you can do something like this, right? This would build up some form for you. So you've got that kind of pumpkin shape coming up and around. Also, we are getting very close to the end of the our free online workshop. If you have any questions that isn't related to our little pumpkin mobile here. If you have any questions related to the exercise that we did, or any questions related to the workshop that you might have, please feel free to ask. I'll probably stick around just a little bit after this is done, just to, in case any of the questions last a little bit longer. I'm not going to just run away from you. Generally, I stick around a little bit after class in case any students have any questions. You know, when I'm actually at the school. So that doesn't work out so well.
No, that's why it's always struggled with cars, like how to translate them into like from organic to mechanical. That's always like a struggle for me because my weakness is like drawing mechanical stuff like robots because I'm actually good at drawing organic stuff.
Right. So you've decided to challenge yourself in a way that's not stepping too far out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the way to do it. That is a great way to build your skills and to do these studies where you're not pushing yourself too far out of your comfort zone, but you're also, you know, trying something new, which is great. Yeah. So that's, let's could do that. What do we do? What do we do? We could knock out the sides of the vehicle. Now you could do something really wacky like that. Right, so your window is going to have to be a curved surface, but at least you've got a little bit more of that roundness coming through. The other thing is you could stick with the vertical. But if I remember correctly, you have actually done something akin to this.
Yeah, I did. Actually took the shape of the actual pumpkin as reference and then try to like I put a car inside like the smart car to see how the windows and doors and the bumper lines within the pumpkin itself. Literally.
All right, so that is it. I hope you guys had a wonderful time. I hope to see you guys at the workshop where we will be learning, we'll be working more on this, and we'll be doing some additional exercises and learning additional techniques that will hopefully get you guys to the next level of your art journey.
When is the next workshop? Because I can't find a schedule.
That one I'm not 100% sure.
Oh, okay, so it's not posted up yet, right?
Yeah, but if you get in contact with the school, they will be more than happy to tell you. But in all likelihood, they're working out the final details.
Okay, got it. Am I allowed to take a screenshot of your drawing of the pumpkin? Because I kind of want to use that as like a inspiration list to take a look at my drawings tomorrow and see what I can play around with.
Sure.
Thank you. It looks nice. It looks close to what I was doing, but yeah, it's almost there.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, so the things that I was thinking about, and these would be curved, is and you can play around with this too, right? Because like jack-o'-lanterns tend to have those triangular eyes.
Yep.
Is I'm thinking about the pumpkin as that rounded shape and using what we learned in POD to think about how those cylinders are coming around. And instead of doing just a cutout, instead I'm using the cylinders to my advantage, and I'm saying, okay, well, I know that this cylinder is kind of facing towards us, but instead of cutting something out, I've just decided I'm going to just have that next cylinder be there. So this is like if a pumpkin was deformed and wound up just having space in behind it, inside it. You know,
Oh, you mean those poorly
Void.
poorly grown pumpkins I've seen on the farms lately? Yeah, I've
exactly.
seen those. Yeah.
Just, the void exists in there. That's where the crows go for fun. But yeah, and thinking about perhaps something like this, right? Seeing that inside edge. So instead of it just being a 2D cutout, we're having that depth that they're known for. You could even, if you decided the window, if you decided that the window was in fact a cutout, something you could do is observe that edge as well. Right? So now, as opposed to a rounded shape that's being formed out of the cylinders, it's just organically happened. Now it's a carved shape because you're showing that hard edge, which wouldn't necessarily exist in nature.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I see it.
Yeah, it's that kind of attention to detail that will be focused on in the course itself. But yeah, that's generally what I got for you. Obviously, I don't have as much time to look at it as you do. You could even play around with potentially stacking pumpkins on top of each other.
Oh yeah, I didn't think of it. Oh
Yep.
yeah, I think there was like a character from The Nightmare Before Christmas that looked like their bodies were stacked on top of each other. I forgot what they were called. I don't know. They were like these characters that look like they're huge.
Right, but then you do have to be worried about them wind up looking like teddy bears.
Oh yeah.
And what other car shapes do we have? We've got the windscreens. The wheels. Your wheels could just be pumpkins to be extra absurd. It depends on how absurdist you want to go.
Oh, I found like a random vintage looking small round car on the internet. It looks really goofy because I see a nose and eyes on the face.
I
It looks like a clown car, to be honest.
bet. All right. Well, it was lovely chatting. It was lovely teaching. I hope you got something out of today's little class.
I did. Thank you so much, Nicole, for your tips and tricks. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to help. It's teaching is such a joy for me. Getting to help people out, whether it's with advice about how to not injure yourself, all the way up to actually teaching you about the subject matter. All of it is good and dandy for me. And I love explaining things. It's sharing the knowledge is a real treat.
Yep, it's more like a expression of therapy for me because I can't find a way to like talk with my family members because they don't know what art is. They'll say, "Oh, your drawing's fine. Like, I don't understand why are you so upset about it?" And I'm like, "There's something wrong with my art." And the only time I can figure out is when I talk to other artists and they can just point it out for me.
Yeah, and school is a great place to get that that kind of community and having a group of people who are working on the same thing as you and having the same struggles as you, and to be able to kind of grow together I can't stress how invaluable it is. I still talk to my classmates, I talk to the animation folks, which I made friends with, which is always a good idea, especially if you're in a school situation. Make friends with everyone, especially the artists, because you never know when you're going to talk to someone and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you love doing that thing? I just saw a job posting in my company for that thing. Here you go." And then they can be your reference. So not only is the school good for kind of helping you have a community of people who are working on the same thing and, striving for like the growth that you're looking for, but also then being able to take that to the next level if that's what you would like, which it sounds like it is something that you would like to do. The workshops are also a great place because you're, again, meeting like-minded individuals who are pushing each other to grow and progress through their art journey. So yeah, I'm glad that I could be here. I'm glad that you guys are here. I'm glad that I could impart some of my knowledge, and I hope to see you guys in the future.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Nicole. I gotta go now. Bye.
Yep, I gotta go too. Bye. It was lovely
Bye.
having you guys.
Well,
Bye.
before you go, I just want to say hi.
Oh, hello.
Thank you. It was a great class.
I'm glad you thought so. And I hope to see you at the workshop.
Yeah, okay, cool. Bye.
Bye-bye.